In 1913, two young school teachers, E.B. Henderson and his wife, Mary Ellen Meriwether Henderson, built their own home. Their neighbor, Joseph Tenner, continued in the family trade of stone masonry.
My Uncle Joe, well, he was a self-taught man. He had his own books, he taught himself.
He would, he would make speeches anywhere, you know. He could go in Washington and argue with any of them senators in there.
E.B. Henderson taught in Washington, D.C., and took the trolley to work. There were two waiting rooms at the East Falls Church station, one for whites, which was heated in the winter and clean, and one for blacks, which was cold and often filled with baggage and livestock.
There was such a debasing situation, and he really resented it, of course, but he had to tolerate it.
In 1912, the Virginia legislature authorized cities and towns to adopt segregation ordinances. By 1915, members of the Falls Church Town Council proposed an ordinance that would confine black residents to a small section of town. Families faced losing their land and homes.
Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. This was segregation, and whites wanted it their way.
I know my grandfather had just built this house in 1913. So he would have had to give up this house. He would have had to sell it or otherwise get rid of it and move someplace else. I think that would have happened to the same thing would have happened to the Tenners. And I think rather than take it, they decided to fight.
And he met with the Tenners and others and decided that something should be done about this.
Something was done. The Colored Citizens Protective League was formed. Eventually, this organization was chartered as the first rural branch of the NAACP. Joseph Tenner was the first president, and E.B. Henderson was the secretary. The NAACP engaged lawyers to prevent the enforcement of the segregation ordinance. The first rural branch had won its first battle.
They were very thorough. They were very respectful in their cause, but they were very serious in their commitment to standing up to what was about to be imposed on them.
I'm sure that this example is the kind of example that would lend not only historical but eminence to groups doing this, not just here in Virginia and the United States, but wherever there are groups that are being so debased as blacks were in those days.
E.B. and Mary Ellen Henderson spent the rest of their lives as educators. Mrs. Henderson was the principal of James Lee Elementary School and was active in membership recruitment for the NAACP.
My mother won awards for having the greatest number of initiates, memberships in the NAACP and the whole branch, the whole organization.
Not only that, but she had the total respect of the community. So if she was canvassing a community, she was going to get the membership because the community respected her. Respected her because she was the principal of the Falls Church Colored School, known at that time as the Falls Church Colored School. I think it was later called the James Lee Elementary School.
The Hendersons lived in their Falls Church home for 50 years.
This is a road map that my grandfather had left for me and to tell his story. But 30 years since his death, the public memory has basically forgotten him.
The task that we were faced with was resurrecting someone's history and accomplishments from the dead.
Basketball was invented in the early 1890s by James Naismith. The people that he taught the game to E.B. Henderson. So he has a direct link to James Naismith.
The African Americans did not participate in the game until around 1904 when E.B. Henderson learned the game at Harvard, brought it back to Washington, D.C. In 1907, he attended the white YMCA with his future brother-in-law, and they were summarily kicked out of the gymnasium while they were sat down to watch a game of basketball.
And that inspired him and probably angered him a little bit too, I would imagine. What he did was he started teaching the basketball at True Reformers Hall. And that was the first facility that had basketball for black men to play.
There was a ballroom. It's very small, but it had a high ceiling. You know, so passing and you wouldn't hit the ceiling necessarily if you threw the ball to somebody. For African Americans, pretty much the only place where they could play was the True Reformers Hall on New Street. E.B. Henderson decided that he would start a league of his own and a tournament by which a national title for African Americans would be established.
He was a one-man band, not just in terms of playing, coaching, fundraising for basketball. This is the guy who gave black basketball structure, not just in the literal sense, but also in the historical context. Really chronicled the origins of black basketball.
Basketball was so much more than a game for Dr. Henderson. It's the story of an entire community. It's the story of a movement, a passion.
E.B. Henderson saw sports and basketball in particular as a vehicle in which African Americans could gain access to northern white colleges and debunk the myth of racial inferiority.
It was a way to open the door to equality because the rules were the same.
If you think about basketball beginning in Washington, D.C. on 12th Street, and then now you go a few blocks down the street and you have Verizon Center, where the best basketball players in the world play on a regular basis, almost all of whom are African American. Geographically, it's a short distance, but historically, it's a huge leap.
When Ed and I would talk about his grandfather, he would get this wistful look in his eye and he'd say, you know, he really should be in the Basketball of Fame.
I decided we're going to write up a nomination.
We spent probably the better part of 6 weeks getting together this package. It turned out to be, I believe it was 138 pages. Thought for sure that the Hall of Fame would call us back and say, oh yeah, sure, that's great. Well, they didn't. So I called and talked with one of the curators there, and he just unofficially said, nobody knows who he is. And at that point, Ed and I began to write articles, send packages out to everybody.
I wish I could say I tore it open and said, this injustice must be, avenged, but I didn't. And to their credit, they continued over the course of the next several years to really begin to continue pushing the narrative.
We took a lot of time working on this. There were times that my family in Detroit were planning birthday parties and weddings, and most of the time we couldn't go because we were working on this.
Every year we watch the ceremony,
thinking, maybe this is the year, maybe this is the year. We were there, and of course, nothing happened.
We kept waiting, And I tell you, more than once, I wonder, is it ever going to happen?
When you consider the true pioneers of the sport, that discussion should begin with Dr. James Naismith and then quickly shift to Dr. Edwin Bancroft, E.B. Henderson.
This year, I got this tweet from David Aldrich saying, "Congratulations to E.B. Henderson for his induction into the Basketball Hall of Fame." What?
And he called me and said, "Nikki, guess what? Grandpa, he got into the Basketball Hall of Fame."
Ladies and gentlemen, representing Dr. E.B. Henderson is his grandson, Edwin Henderson, and his wife, Nikki.
It's very hard to bring people back to life, to kind of make this person whole in contemporary eyes. What Ed and Nikki did was give E.B. Henderson some dimension, so it wasn't just someone on a page of a book.
All that's happened, hopefully, will help to reacquaint the general public with the contributions of my grandfather and the work that he did to nurture the game at its infancy.
This was not just important for them as a family, it was important for the history of basketball to know this, and that E.B. Henderson deserved a real recognition of what he had accomplished.
It wasn't just about the sport. It was really about a philosophy of life. It was about equality for all people, education for all people. That's what he spent his life doing.
What it do, good people? Coming to you live from Chaz TV 410. I'm your host, Chaz Dean. I ain't gonna hold you too much longer. Those that don't know who I am, my name is Don Chaz Dean. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I attended Dunbar High School. I started on the basketball team, came out in 1999. I'm 43 years old today. I have a real interest. I have a burning desire to find out more history on Black America and Black America in sports. So I started this journey maybe about a month ago. I haven't even been doing my usual with just covering sports overall because I'm so intrigued on what I'm reading today. I'd like to give a huge shout out to the Henderson family for even putting this together, this information together. I also like to give a special shout out to the YMCA. Now, Claude Johnson, I ain't forget about you either. I have not. But we're going to get to you because you right now, you the president of this whole thing. Everything, all the information that I've been all the information that I have been seeing, majority of it been coming from you. So, I huge shout out. But hold on, before we get to all that, I like to read a quote that Mr. Edwin had wrote. And it goes like this. Edwin B. Henderson set the tone and created the infrastructure for African American participation in athletics by creating leagues and associating for Black athletes and referees when no such thing previously existed. End quote. Y'all want to hear it again? Y'all can rewind. But we ain't done. I'd like to thank y'all for tuning in and continue to watch because I'm about to drop another video. Let's learn together. There's a lot of this I'm learning for the first time, and I'm pretty sure you are too. So coming live from Chaz TV. If you ain't subscribed to the channel by now, subscribe to the channel, like, share, subscribe, and share the information, good people. Holla.